My name is Jason Dowlatabad. I'm a data analyst on the policy research team at Uber, and I'm thrilled to be here today to talk to you guys about transportation alternatives. Just to get started, I'd like to take us back sort of 5 years to 2010. The United States was just coming out of the recession. We're seeing unemployment rates start to come back below double digits. And one of the sort of big effects of the whole recession was that congestion in the South Bay area was actually down substantially, but for all the wrong reasons, right? People weren't going places, goods weren't moving around the country. If this was to persist, there were going to have to be some very fundamental shifts in how people acted. At the same time, we're sort of getting access to more and more technology. This is the year that the iPhone 4 came out, and smartphone penetration in the United States reached 25%. So really, building steam, but still not quite there enough to produce, real, society-wide changes. And it's also the same year that Uber was founded in San Francisco, launching in June of 2010, with the very basic idea of being able to press a button on your phone and get a ride. But while this idea is really simple in the concept, in the execution, it's much more complex. One of the most important parts of the experience is that before you even request a ride, there's a huge amount of information presented to the rider. Right? They have at their fingertips, the availability to tell how much a trip is going to cost, as well as very prominently displayed how long they can expect to wait for their ride to arrive. This means that riders can make very informed decisions, and they really feel that they have control over the process that's in front of them. And this extends to the actual ride experience itself. You know who your driver is going to be. And you know what vehicle they're in, and you can even see them approach you. So any sort of feelings that can exist with other modes of transportation of sort of powerlessness or sort of not really knowing or being kept in the loop as to what's going on is removed by that. Additionally, at the end of the ride, both the rider and driver are given the opportunity to rate each other. Which provides an extra level of sort of feedback and transparency to this platform, and helps provide a sense of sort of input on both sides that didn't exist in the taxi system beforehand. So we had all these things starting to happen in 2010, and in 2015, a lot had actually changed. We saw we've been talking now for 5 years sort of about the idea of peak car, as people actually do choose to drive less, as was pointed out earlier. But we're still not fully there. People are still putting a lot of new cars on the roadway, and there's a lot of work that can be done in terms of right-sizing our vehicle fleets. A lot of new vehicles that are going to be put on the on the road this year are light-duty trucks. The top 3 selling models in the U.S. last year were the Ford F-Series, the Chevrolet Silverado, and the Dodge Ram. Meanwhile, our technology has continued to advance. The iPhone has gotten more and more powerful, and penetration of smartphones has reached over 75% in the United States. It's now something that is really available to the vast majority of American residents and citizens. With the sort of, through the use of this platform and this amazing opportunity for innovation, that small startup called Uber has grown to be available in more than 300 cities, 50 countries around the world, and is providing economic opportunities to more than 1 million driver partners. But, what about congestion? What about congestion? Congestion, unfortunately, hasn't gotten better. It's actually started to get worse again. Though people may be driving less on an individual basis, there are more and more people driving. And when they are driving, they're driving a lot more in our cities. So over the past 2 years, recent studies by TomTom have shown that congestion in the United States is up and on the rise, with substantial costs to all of us. For example, in the city of Los Angeles, one of the most congested cities in the world, a commute that would only take 30 minutes without traffic can take up to 25 minutes longer. So we're talking about almost doubling commute times as a result of this, and literally many, many lifetimes lost every day in terms of human time as a result of this across the country. Well, one possible solution to this is mega projects, right? And we can build gigantic highway interchanges to help our cars move more efficiently, but this is sort of more, sort of treats the symptom, not the core cause, which is a lot of single occupancy trips that are occurring. Or we can try and reduce our dependency on vehicles through large mass transit projects like California's electric rail program. But even then, we have to make sure that around these projects, we're building a support infrastructure that allows people to move away from their personal vehicles, right? A light rail, a heavy rail station is fantastic, but if it has to have a huge amount of parking around it, then all of a sudden it has to be far away from where people live, and now they need to drive to get there. So they don't really get rid of their personal vehicles, and they're still driving around the city, causing huge amounts of congestion. So, what's something that we can do about this, sort of to get people from their cars into transit and into other modes, at the very least, so they're not driving alone? Well, we can't just build our ways out of these problems. We don't really have the time, and we don't really have billions and billions of extra dollars lying around to put into these projects. But though we've tried a lot of very clever solutions, one of the biggest problems has always been the core strengths of the car, and one of those is really the car as personal mobility insurance, right? It would be very easy for all of us to van pool and take public transit everywhere if we could live our lives to a very regular schedule, but that really isn't how it works, right? People's children get sick and they need to leave work and go pick them up at school, or you just want to be spontaneous sometime and go somewhere. So we need to sort of compete with this strength of cars, and a lot of alternatives don't do that, right? For example, as was mentioned earlier, if you miss a bus with a long headway, you can't really, you've sort of lost a huge amount of your time. You don't have that flexibility. You need to be there at very specific points. As well, you're sort of beholden to the transit network, and first and last mile problems can make it just completely unfeasible for you to take trips for the purposes that you desire. So one potential solution to this is Uber, right? Uber provides immediacy, it provides reliability, but it's not a complete solution in and of itself. Uber is really part of a dense sort of set of choices that people have and that they can utilize for their personal mobility versus using their own automobile, right? So being able to rely on public transportation for long distance trips and trips along major trunk lines, or when you need a vehicle for a longer trip, a shared vehicle through something like Getaround or Relay Rides or a traditional car rental agency, providing that sort of next level of mobility. But really providing a sort of on-demand layer that interacts with all of these things and suddenly allows them to start competing with personal car ownership. Because instead of waiting 20 minutes for a bus, or wondering for 30 minutes whether or not a cab is going to come, you suddenly have the opportunity to get, for example, in San Francisco, a ride in less than 3 minutes on average, right? So that's maybe less time than it takes you to walk down to the parking garage and actually drive your car onto the street, right? It's immediate, it's available, and it's reliable, right? In San Francisco, the chance that any one ride request will result in a completed trip is over 90%. And this is very much the same between San Francisco's richest neighborhoods and its poorest neighborhoods. This opportunity is available quickly and reliably, to pretty much everyone in most of the Bay Area right now. And more importantly, this sort of like layer that brings all these other alternatives together and makes them a cohesive package versus car ownership is getting better and better. We launched in Cupertino in July of 2013, and wait times were, by our current standards, not where we want them to be. They were more than 12 minutes. But we've continued to get better and better in Cupertino, and now the average wait time for UberX service is less than 5. And this is continued like in massive metropolitan areas. This one's also sort of a demonstration of how my team's mapping has gotten better and better over the years. But in this is sort of a map of Chicago. Now in Chicago, they actually have special areas of the city that have been labeled as underserved by taxis. And Uber has more than half of its trips starting or ending in them in any particular month. Right? So we've really helped spread out and cover a lot more places with on-demand transportation than had easy access to it beforehand. And it's gotten better and better. In this graph on the left, the darkest color was was places with more than 90% of trips under 20 minutes wait, and that's decreased. And on the next one, it actually got so much better that we made the darker color 95% and up. And that's sort of continuing to spread across the Chicago area with incredible immediacy and incredible reliability. Now, a lot of this sort of feeds into public transit. Like once you have this amazing layer, how does it interact with public transit? How does it make public transit better? And how does public transit make it better? Well, Uber helps substantially with public transit by extending its reach, right? I mean, I took Uber from my office to the Caltrain, and then was able to take Uber from the Caltrain down here. Something that so making a trip that would have taken a substantially longer period of time take maybe an extra 20 minutes in terms of the car trips on either side of it. So it really helps address the first and last mile challenges. And by doing this, people can start thinking about taking transit more rather than using their own personal cars, also because they have that mobility insurance available to them. They recently did a survey in San Francisco looking at whether or not people would take transit more if there was reliable taxi service available to them. And more than 30% of San Franciscans said that they would, and more than 15% said they definitely would. Right? Like this is something that people would really like to have access to, but they often feel uncomfortable because they don't know if they're going to be able to get where they need to go when they really need to get there. Uber can also help supplement during disruptions, and in general allows transit agencies to get more from their major investments. Furthermore, public transit is a great benefit to Uber. Less congestion on the streets means people can get where they need to go faster. And it also really helps people transition to using Uber more, right? But by having this alternative to car ownership and being part of this wonderful package, sort of all of the components of it are made better and stronger. So we actually have a few partnerships already. These are two of our most recent partnerships with public transportation agencies, MARTA in Atlanta and DART in Dallas. Right now, these partnerships are sort of very much based around messaging to riders of both systems, suggesting to Uber riders that they can use public transportation for portions of their trips that overlap with it, and suggesting to transit riders that they can use Uber to get from their terminal stop to their terminal destination. But there's a lot of other opportunities for future partnerships. Uber's platform is extremely sophisticated, so we can fill in all kinds of last mile gaps sort of just through the transit provider itself providing subsidies to people, right? Uber allows you to establish, for example, a particular geofence around a stop and apply rules to that fence. For example, so many municipalities now actually pay taxi cabs to sit at far-strung bus and light rail stations to provide last-mile service to remote areas, that sort of system would be unnecessary or could be easily supplemented by allowing you to just have a rule there, where anyone standing at that station could hail a ride and have it subsidized automatically by the county or by the city. But this is all nice to talk about, in terms of nice partnerships. How are people actually using Uber with transit today? This map here shows Uber in Portland, Oregon, before we were actually allowed to pick up within the city. These are trips that started or ended in the cities surrounding Portland. And one of the things we noticed was that a lot of people were using Uber to get to and from Portland's commuter rail stations, Max and West. More than 25% of the trips in the surrounding cities of Portland were to and from the areas immediately surrounding these stations, right? So Uber and transit are already working hand in hand without official partnerships in place. And this is even true here in Cupertino. These are trips over the last month that went between Cupertino and the Caltrain station in Sunnyvale, right? And there are hundreds of these trips, and over the last year, the number of these trips has more than doubled. Like this is a mode that more and more people are embracing, and Uber's helping to bridge this gap more and more effectively as time goes on. So all these partnerships, all these sort of complementarities really help to take vehicles off our roads, helping to reduce congestion and costs on the entire system, help us get the most out of our existing infrastructure, and really help reduce climate impacts of single occupancy trips. But they also have further impacts, right? Because you now have people sort of leaving their cars at home and relying on other forms of transportation, they're less likely to make really bad decisions with their cars. One of the sort of like highest profile, most common bad decisions people make is driving drunk. And we've seen that a lot of Uber usage, especially on weekends, spikes at the same hours when people would otherwise be getting into fatal car crashes while drunk, right? And really, really exciting and interesting research is currently in a working paper stage at Temple University, sort of showing a direct, statistical link between UberX's launch in cities across California and a reduction in deaths and accidents related to alcohol. So, there are broad societal benefits to getting people out of their personal cars and into the sort of dense set of choices I spoke about earlier. And of course, as you get more and more people out of their cars and more people into all these different modes, you get to do really, really cool things like putting more of them in each vehicle, right? So we have a product called Uber Pool that allows us to take multiple trips that are traveling in the same direction that maybe share an overlapping component and put them both in the same vehicle, right? So all of a sudden you take two cars that were going to be doing two separate trips, and now it's just one on the road, providing better utilization and bringing people together, both making this package more affordable because you no longer have to pay for all of the section that you're sharing, you just split it, but also making it even less impactful on the world around it, right? And this is sort of just an illustration of how that works, right? I mean, both of these passengers now get to share the distance between the pickup of passenger 2 and the drop-off of passenger 1. And you only need one car to do it. So, and these are all extremely exciting options. And in SF already, this is something that's sort of really rolling out in our more mature markets, right? Our very mature markets right now. In San Francisco, it's been, absolutely massive. Almost 50% of UberX trips in San Francisco are now actually Uber Pool trips. And as these choices get more and more adoption, we have more and more options to do really incredible things with them. We're certainly going to continue to innovate, and we're really excited to see what else the future holds. Thank you very much.